Part 1, The Massacre. The transmission from New Busan came through at 0400 hours, Earth Standard Time. Commander Hyun-woo was drinking his morning coffee when the emergency alert shattered the quiet of his apartment. His hands trembled as he activated the holographic display. The face that appeared belonged to his wife Mirai. Behind her, through the windows of their home on New Busan, the sky burned green. Hyun-woo, they're using biological weapons, Mirai said. Her voice was steady, but tears streamed down her face. The children are already showing symptoms. It's airborne. It's in the water. It's everywhere. She coughed and blood spotted her lips. I want you to know that we love you. Tell Earth what happened here. Make them remember us. The transmission ended. Hyun-woo tried to call back, but the communication network was already dead. He stood frozen in his kitchen, the coffee cup still warm in his hand while 7 million people died 300 light-years away. New Busan had been humanity's pride. A colony world with rolling hills that reminded settlers of Korea's countryside, rivers full of fish, cities that blended Earth architecture with the strange beauty of an alien sky. 7 million people had built their lives there over 20 years. They grew crops, raised children, and dreamed of the future. The Galactic Council had approved the settlement. All the paperwork was filed. All the regulations followed. The Vreth Dominion didn't care about paperwork. Ambassador Ji-won received the formal complaint from the Vreth 3 hours after the attack began. She read it in her office at the Galactic Council headquarters, a massive station orbiting a neutron star. The complaint stated that New Busan violated the Vreth buffer zone. It demanded immediate evacuation. The document was dated 2 weeks earlier, but the Galactic Council had delayed delivering it. Standard bureaucratic procedure, Ji-won ran to the council chamber. She demanded an emergency session. She showed them the death tolls streaming in from New Busan. 7 million humans dying in real time. She begged for intervention. The Galactic Council had peacekeeping fleets. They had the power to stop this. The council deliberated for 6 hours while New Busan died. The insectoid Vreth representative clicked its mandibles in what might have been amusement. The human colony was warned. Our patience has limits. This matter is resolved. The crystalline Asari delegate shimmered with cold light. The Vreth claim is legitimate. The humans should have consulted more thoroughly before settling. The slug-like Kanthari trade minister oozed across its platform. Economic sanctions against the Vreth would disrupt galactic commerce. We must be practical. One by one, the species that made up the Galactic Council voted. Some abstained, some expressed regret. None voted for intervention. The final resolution was simple. The Vreth Dominion would pay a fine of 0.3% of their annual GDP to Earth as compensation for the unfortunate misunderstanding. Ji-won stood in the chamber, surrounded by aliens who commanded fleets and controlled star systems. She was a small woman, barely 40 years old, who had dedicated her life to building bridges between humanity and the galaxy. She had believed in diplomacy. She had believed in justice. 7 million people, she said quietly. 7 million human beings are dead. And you offer us money? The Counselor Prime, a being of pure energy contained in a glowing sphere, spoke with a voice like distant thunder. Ambassador, your species is young. You must learn that the galaxy operates on scales beyond individual lives. This incident, while regrettable, is minor in the scope of galactic history. Ji-won looked at each of them. You just taught humanity the most important lesson we will ever learn. Thank you for that. She walked out of the council chamber and never returned. On Earth, Dr. Minho watched the news broadcasts with a growing sense of horror. He was a xenobiologist, one of the scientists who had helped humanity make first contact 15 years ago. He had studied the Vreth extensively. He knew their biology, their culture, their history. He had believed they were capable of reason. The biological weapon they used on New Busan was sophisticated. It targeted mammalian respiratory systems specifically. It caused hemorrhaging, organ failure, and death within 72 hours. There was no cure. The Vreth had designed it, tested it, and deployed it knowing exactly what it would do. Minho pulled up every file he had on Vreth physiology. He began taking notes, vulnerabilities, weaknesses, ways to kill them efficiently. He worked through the night, and when morning came, he sent his research to Earth's military command with a simple message. When the time comes, you'll need this. Captain Yoonji commanded the patrol ship Indomitable, stationed near the edge of human space. She received orders to maintain position and monitor Vreth activity. Do not engage. Do not provoke. Earth's government was still trying to navigate the diplomatic channels. Yunji ignored the orders. She took Indomitable across the border into Vreth space. She found a small outpost, a mining facility with minimal defenses. She destroyed it completely. Every ship, every station, every Vreth life form within sensor range. Then she broadcast a message on all frequencies. For New Busan, this is just the beginning. Earth's military command court-martialed her immediately. The trial lasted 3 days. The prosecution argued that she had violated orders, started an interstellar incident, and potentially triggered a war humanity couldn't win. Yunji didn't deny any of it. They killed 7 million of us, she said. The galaxy did nothing. So I did something. If that's a crime, then I'm guilty. The military judges found her guilty of all charges. Then Earth's population learned about the trial. Protests erupted in every city on every human world. Millions of people took to the streets demanding action, demanding justice, demanding revenge. Earth's unity government held an emergency session. The vote was unanimous. Ambassador Jiwan was recalled from the Galactic Council. All human diplomats were withdrawn. All trade agreements canceled. All cooperation ended. The Prime Minister of Earth, an elderly man named Kang Ho who had survived the resource wars of the previous century, made the announcement that changed human history. His face was gray with exhaustion, his eyes hollow with grief. The Galactic Council has shown us that we cannot rely on others for justice. The Vreth Dominion has shown us that mercy is weakness in this galaxy. Today, Earth's government, with the full support of our people, declares the Stand Law. Effective immediately, all alien vessels found in human space will be destroyed without warning. All alien individuals found on human worlds will be executed without trial. We are withdrawing from the Galactic Council. We are closing our borders. For the next 100 years, humanity will speak to the galaxy only through silence. He paused, and when he continued, his voice was hard as steel. We will use this time to grow strong. We will use this time to remember, and when we return, the galaxy will understand that human lives matter, that our children matter, that our grief and rage matter. 100 years from now, we will ensure that no species ever makes the mistake the Vreth made. No alien shall stand on human soil, and soon no alien shall stand at all. The broadcast ended. Across human space, memorial services began for the 7 million dead of New Busan. Commander Hyun-woo stood in a military cemetery on Earth, staring at 3 empty graves. His wife, his daughter, his son. Symbols only because there were no bodies to bury. The biological weapon had reduced them to dust. He made a promise to those empty graves, a promise that would echo through a century of human development. A promise that would reshape the galaxy. I will make them pay. All of them. Every last one. Part 2. The Long Silence. 50 years after the massacre, the galaxy had almost forgotten about humanity. The borders of human space remained closed. No ships came out. No messages were sent. The few alien vessels that had tried to cross into human territory simply vanished without a trace. Eventually, the other species learned to avoid that section of space entirely. The Galactic Council listed humanity as self-isolated in their records and moved on to other concerns. Some younger species knew humans only from history lessons, a cautionary tale about a temperamental race that couldn't handle galactic politics. The Vreth Dominion had grown powerful in the decades since New Busan. With no human interference, they expanded their territory. They built larger fleets. The fine they paid to Earth had been a minor inconvenience quickly forgotten. The Vreth Queen Mother sometimes mentioned the incident in her speeches as an example of Vreth strength and efficiency. Behind the closed borders, humanity had transformed itself into something the galaxy would not recognize. General Tai Yang stood in the command center of Mars Defense Station, watching the fleet exercises through the panoramic windows. He was 35 years old, born 3 years after New Busan's destruction. His grandfather had been Commander Hyun-woo, who died 20 years ago still grieving for his family. Taeyang never met his grandmother or his aunt and uncle. They were names on a memorial wall, faces in old photographs, but he remembered them. Every human born after New Busan remembered. The massacre was taught in schools. The images were shown to children. The names of the 7 million were recited at annual ceremonies. Humanity had built its culture around one central truth. The galaxy was dangerous and only strength mattered. The fleet that passed before Taeyang's eyes would have terrified the Galactic Council. 1,500 warships in this exercise alone, and Mars was just one of 12 major military installations. Earth had built shipyards on every rocky planet and moon in the solar system. Automated factories on Mercury produced weapons day and night. The asteroid belt had been converted into ammunition. Humanity had spent 50 years preparing for war. Not just any war, the one that would repay the debt of 7 million lives. Agent Hana moved through the crowds of the Kanthari trade world like a ghost. She looked nothing like a human. Genetic modifications had changed her skin to a pale gray. Prosthetics altered her facial structure. Chemical treatments changed her body chemistry to match Kanthari biology, closely enough to fool most sensors. She had lived on this world for 3 years, working as a low-level clerk in a shipping company. Humans weren't supposed to be able to do what Hana did. The genetic modifications required violated every treaty the Galactic Council had ever written. But Earth wasn't part of the Galactic Council anymore. Earth didn't care about their laws. Hana was one of 300 deep-cover agents scattered across alien worlds. They gathered intelligence. They learned languages. They studied military capabilities and cultural weaknesses. They prepared the groundwork for what was coming. In her tiny apartment, Hana compiled another report for Earth Intelligence Command. The Kanthari had provided 60% of the funding for the Vreth biological weapon program. They profited from New Busan's destruction by filling the trade gap humanity left behind. The report included names, dates, transaction records, everything needed for a reckoning. She encrypted the data and sent it through a relay network that would take 6 months to reach Earth. Then she went to bed, dreaming in a language that wasn't her own, living a life that wasn't hers. The loneliness was crushing. But she thought about 7 million people who never got to feel lonely again, and she continued her mission. Engineer Soman worked in a laboratory buried 3 kilometers beneath the surface of Europa. The ice moon was one of Earth's most secure research facilities. What happened here was classified at the highest levels. Even most military personnel didn't know the details. Soman's team designed weapons. Not just any weapons. Species-specific weapons. Biological agents that targeted Vreth physiology. Sonic frequencies that shattered Osari crystalline structures. Electromagnetic pulses calibrated to disrupt Kanthari nervous systems. For every species in the Galactic Council, Soman's team had developed a way to kill them efficiently. She sometimes thought about the irony. The Vreth had used biological weapons on New Busan. Now humanity was perfecting the same technology, making it more lethal, more precise, more horrible. But Somin's ethical concerns had died with her parents on New Busan. She was 5 years old when they died. Old enough to remember their faces, old enough to hate. Her latest project was a delivery system that could deploy biological agents across an entire planet in under 6 hours. She called it the Mercy Protocol, because it killed faster than what the Vreth had used. She considered that an improvement. Admiral Doyen commanded the UDS Reckoning, humanity's first dreadnought-class world ship. The vessel was 10 kilometers long, built in secret in the Oort cloud over 15 years. It carried a population of 50,000 military personnel and enough firepower to level a planet. The Reckoning was designed to operate independently for decades. It had its own farms, factories, and shipyards. It was a mobile fortress, a symbol of humanity's new philosophy. Earth would never again rely on distant colonies that could be cut off and destroyed. Humanity would project power wherever it went. Doyen walked through the ship's memorial hall, where holographic displays showed the faces of New Busan's victims. 7 million faces cycling through on endless rotation. He paused at a random display. A young woman named Hyejin, age 23, who had been a teacher. The display showed her smiling, surrounded by children. Doyen wondered if any of those children survived long enough to understand what was happening to them. He hoped not. He hoped the poison took them quickly. Then he pushed those thoughts away and returned to his command duties. Mercy was a luxury humanity couldn't afford anymore. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the Galactic Council was having problems. The Vreth Dominion had grown aggressive. They made demands of smaller species backed by threats of military action. The council members who had voted to appease the Vreth 50 years ago now regretted that decision. The Vreth had learned that violence worked, that the Council wouldn't stop them. In the Council chambers, debates raged about how to contain the Vreth without triggering a major war. Some representatives suggested reaching out to humanity, asking for help. That proposal was quickly rejected. Humanity was still bitter about New Busan. They wouldn't help. They couldn't help. They were isolated, weak, probably collapsed into civil war by now. That's what the Council believed. They were spectacularly wrong. Agent Hana's latest mission took her to a Vreth military complex on their border territory. She worked as a maintenance technician. Invisible to the Vreth commanders who barely acknowledged her presence, she accessed their strategic planning networks and downloaded everything. What she found made her blood run cold. The Vreth were planning a preemptive strike against Earth. They had spent decades developing weapons specifically designed to crack planetary shields and bunker defenses. They calculated that humanity, after 50 years of isolation, would be technologically stagnant. Easy targets. The Vreth invasion fleet was already being assembled. Launch date, 3 months from now. Hana didn't waste time. She abandoned her cover identity immediately and fled to the nearest extraction point. The escape was messy. Vreth security forces pursued her across 2 star systems. She lost them by destroying her ship's reactor core and ejecting in a survival pod that drifted in the radiation cloud for 6 days before a human stealth ship picked her up. She delivered her intelligence to Earth Defense Command in person. General Taeyang listened to her report in silence, his face emotionless. When she finished, he asked only one question. "How confident are you in this timeline?" 95%, Hana replied. "The Vreth are coming. 3 months, maybe less." Taeyang nodded slowly. Then he smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a man who had waited his entire life for this moment. "Good," he said. "We're ready. In fact, we've been ready for 30 years. Now we just need to decide how much of the Vreth species to leave alive when we're finished." He activated the communication network, linking all human military installations. The message was simple. "Alert status black. This is not a drill. All personnel to battle stations. The stand law ends today. The hunt begins tomorrow." Across human space, fleets that had trained in secret for 5 decades began moving toward the borders. Weapons that had never been tested in real combat were loaded and armed. Soldiers who had spent their entire lives preparing for this war checked their equipment one final time. Admiral Doyen stood on the bridge of the reckoning as the massive ship began its journey toward Vreth space. He thought about the 7 million faces in the memorial hall. Soon their deaths would be repaid. Soon the galaxy would understand that human lives had value. Soon the silence would end. And when humanity spoke again, it would speak in fire and blood. Part 3. No alien shall stand. The Vreth invasion fleet crossed into human space at 0600 hours on a Tuesday morning. 300 warships, the pride of the Vreth Dominion, formed up in attack formation as they approached the outer marker buoys. The Vreth Commander Prime, a massive insectoid creature named Velk, clicked his mandibles in satisfaction. The humans had not even responded to their approach. Perhaps the species had died out after all. Velk's satisfaction lasted exactly 47 seconds. The space around his fleet suddenly lit up with weapons fire. Not from ships. From the empty space itself, automated defense platforms that had been sitting silent and invisible for 50 years activated all at once. Thousands of them. They had been waiting, patient and deadly, for any alien vessel to make the mistake of entering human territory. The first wave of fire destroyed 70 Vreth ships before their shields could activate. The second wave took another 40. Velk screamed orders at his communications officers, demanding to know where the attacks were coming from. The sensors showed nothing but weapons fire appearing from nowhere. Then the human ships arrived. They dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, appearing so close to the Vreth fleet that collision warnings screamed on every Vreth bridge. The human vessels were like nothing the Vreth had ever seen. Sleek black, covered in stealth plating that made them almost invisible even when they were right in front of you. And they were fast. Impossibly fast. General Taeyang watched the battle from the command center on Mars. The holographic display showed the Vreth fleet being torn apart in real time. It was beautiful. It was justice. It was 50 years of preparation bearing fruit. "Do we have communications intercepts?" he asked. An intelligence officer nodded. "Yes, sir. The Vreth are panicking. They're trying to retreat." "Jam their FTL drives," Taeyang ordered. "No one leaves. I want every Vreth in that fleet to understand what it feels like to be trapped while death comes for them. The human fleet moved through the Vreth formation like sharks through fish. Point defense systems that should have protected the Vreth ships were useless. The human weapons moved too fast, changed direction too quickly. Missiles that should have been intercepted slipped through shields as if they weren't there. Because they weren't. The missiles phased through shield frequencies, a technology the Galactic Council had declared impossible. Captain Jiho led a boarding team onto the Vreth flagship. His team wore powered armor that made them look like metal demons. They cut through the hull and swarmed into the ship's corridors. The Vreth defenders never had a chance. Jiho's team had trained for this specific mission for 20 years. They knew Vreth ship layouts better than the Vreth themselves. They knew where the crew would be, how they would respond, what weapons they would use. Every variable had been calculated. Every response predicted. The Vreth fought hard. They were warriors, after all. But warriors armed with conventional weapons couldn't stop soldiers who had been genetically enhanced, cybernetically augmented, and trained to a degree of perfection that bordered on insanity. Jiho's team moved through the ship like death itself, killing everything that moved. They reached the command center where Velk had barricaded himself with his command staff. Jiho didn't bother with negotiation. He simply used a plasma cutter to burn through the door. Velk raised a weapon, clicking something in the Vreth language that probably meant defiance or courage. Jiho shot him in the head. Then he shot every other Vreth in the room. Then his team moved on to the next section of the ship. The entire boarding action took 14 minutes. Outside, the battle was already over. 293 Vreth ships had been destroyed. 7 had been disabled and captured. Not a single Vreth vessel escaped. The human fleet suffered 0 casualties. 3 ships reported minor damage to their hull plating. General Taiyang sent a message on all Galactic Council frequencies. He wanted everyone to hear this. Every species, every government, every individual being who had voted against intervention 50 years ago. 100 years ago, the Vreth Dominion murdered 7 million humans. The Galactic Council did nothing. Today we remember, the stand law that kept us isolated is now the hunt law. We are coming for the Vreth, we are coming for everyone who supported them. We are coming for everyone who voted to do nothing, while our people died. You taught us that the galaxy respects only strength. Thank you for that lesson. We learned it well, the message ended. Across the galaxy, governments that had forgotten about the angry young species called humanity suddenly remembered, and they were afraid. The Vreth Dominion mobilized their home fleet, 500 warships twice the size of the invasion force. They gathered near Vreth Prime, the homeworld, and waited for the human attack. They didn't wait long. Admiral Doyen brought the reckoning out of FTL travel 1 million kilometers from Vreth Prime. The massive world ship hung in space like a dark moon, visible even from the planet's surface. Vreth citizens looked up at the sky and saw the shadow of their own death waiting patiently. The Vreth fleet charged toward the reckoning. They planned to overwhelm the single massive ship with numbers and firepower. It was a sound strategy. It would have worked against any other vessel in the galaxy. But the reckoning wasn't alone. From the shadow of the world ship, 500 human frigates emerged. They had been hiding in the reckoning's sensor shadow, invisible until the moment they activated their weapons. The Vreth fleet found themselves surrounded. The Battle of Vreth Prime lasted 6 hours. It was the largest space battle in galactic history. The Vreth fought with desperate courage, knowing they were defending their homeworld and their species' survival. They destroyed 12 human frigates. They damaged the reckoning's outer hull. They lost everything else. Engineer Soman watched the battle from her laboratory on Europa. Her weapons were being used in combat for the first time. The biological agents worked perfectly. Vreth ships that were boarded found their crews dying within minutes, their exoskeletons dissolving from the inside. The sonic weapons she designed shattered Vreth communications equipment. Every system performed exactly as calculated. She felt nothing watching the Vreth die. She had expected to feel satisfaction or perhaps horror at what she had created. Instead, there was just emptiness. 7 million deaths had been repaid, but her parents were still dead. Revenge didn't bring them back. When the last Vreth warship fell silent, Admiral Doyen began the next phase. The reckoning moved into orbit around Vreth Prime. The human fleet spread out, targeting every orbital station, every satellite, every piece of space infrastructure the Vreth possessed. Then they methodically destroyed it all. The Vreth government broadcast surrender messages. They offered peace terms. They begged for mercy. Admiral Doyen listened to every message and ignored them all. Mercy was not part of the mission parameters. The bombardment took 3 days. Human ships reduced every shipyard to debris. Every orbital defense platform was vaporized. The Vreth space elevator, a structure that had taken a century to build, was cut apart and allowed to fall into the atmosphere. The pieces burned like falling stars over Vreth cities, but Doyen didn't target the planet itself. No weapons fell on Vreth Prime's surface. No cities were bombed. The civilian population was left untouched. That was deliberate. Humanity wanted the Vreth to survive. They wanted the Vreth to remember. A species without the ability to leave their planet was no longer a threat. The Vreth would spend the next century rebuilding what humanity destroyed in 3 days. Every time they looked at the sky, they would remember the reckoning hanging there like judgment itself. General Taiyang addressed the human fleet after the battle. His face appeared on every ship's communication screen, on every military base, in every home, on every human world. The Vreth Dominion no longer exists as a military power. Their fleets are destroyed. Their orbital infrastructure is gone. They are trapped on their homeworld, exactly as they trapped our people on New Busan before murdering them. But we are not the Vreth. We are not genocidal monsters. We are justice. He paused and his expression hardened. However, justice is not finished. The Vreth had help. They had supporters. They had species that provided weapons, funding, and intelligence. Those species voted against helping New Busan. They profited from human deaths. Now they will pay the price. Behind him, a holographic display showed a list, 43 species names. Next to each name, a detailed accounting of their involvement in New Busan's massacre, or their support of the Vreth afterward. This is the ledger of inaction, Taiyang said. We will work our way down this list. Every species that contributed to our suffering will face consequences. Every government that chose profit over justice will learn what that choice costs. The hunt has just begun. Across human space, fleet commanders received their orders. New targets, new missions. The war that started at New Busan 50 years ago was spreading across the galaxy. Agent Hana, recovered from her escape and back on Earth, watched Taiyang's speech from her apartment. She thought about the 3 years she spent living among aliens, learning their languages, understanding their cultures. She thought about the Kanthari clerk who had been kind to her, sharing lunch and complaining about his boss. He probably died when the human economic attacks collapsed the Kanthari banking system. Part 4. The Reckoning Spreads. 6 months after the Vreth defeat, humanity controlled 40% of the galaxy's major trade routes, not through occupation or diplomacy, through fear. Alien shipping companies simply refused to operate in regions where human warships patrolled. Insurance companies declared those areas too high risk. Entire sectors of space became human territory without a single shot being fired. The ledger of inaction guided every human military operation. General Taiyang's staff had spent decades researching every species that played a role in New Busan's destruction. The level of detail was terrifying. They knew which Kanthari banks financed the Vreth biological weapons program. They knew which Osari intelligence officers provided targeting data. They knew which species voted against intervention and why. Humanity remembered everything. And now humanity was collecting debts. The Kanthari trade consortiums learned this lesson first. The slug-like Kanthari had built their entire civilization on banking and commerce. They controlled 60% of galactic currency exchanges. Their financial networks connected every major economy in the galaxy. They believed this made them untouchable. Money, they thought, was more powerful than warships. Specialist Yuna proved them wrong. She was a psychological warfare expert who had spent 15 years studying economic systems and information networks. She didn't use weapons or soldiers. She used data. On a Tuesday morning, Yuna and her team released 40 years of accumulated intelligence about Kanthari banking practices. Every illegal transaction, every corrupt official, every hidden account, everything. The data dump was massive. It took less than 6 hours for the Kanthari financial system to collapse completely. Investors fled. Trading partners cut ties. Governments froze Kanthari assets. The species that had controlled the galaxy's money suddenly found themselves bankrupt. But Yuna wasn't finished. She broadcast a message to every Kanthari world. The message was simple: footage from New Busan, the final hours, children choking on poisoned air, parents holding their dying families, 7 million people suffering the effects of weapons the Kanthari paid for. The broadcast played on every public screen, every personal device, every communication channel. Yuna made sure every Kanthari citizen saw exactly what their government's profit had cost. She wanted them to understand that their comfortable lives were built on human corpses. The Kanthari government sent desperate messages to Earth, begging for mercy. They offered reparations, territory, anything humanity wanted. General Taeyang's response was brief. You offered us money for 7 million lives. We don't accept payment. We only accept understanding. Now you understand. The Asari Empire faced a different kind of justice. The crystalline beings existed as energy patterns inside mineral structures. They were beautiful, elegant, and completely amoral. They had provided intelligence to the Vreth about New Busan's defenses because the Vreth paid well. Business was business. Lives were irrelevant. Taeyang sent a strike team of 50 operators to the Osari homeworld. Captain Jiho led the mission. They infiltrated the Osari capital city, bypassing security systems that were supposed to be impenetrable. The Osari had never imagined someone would be insane enough to attack their high command directly. The attack happened during a state ceremony. The entire Osari leadership was gathered in their great hall, a structure of pure crystal that resonated with harmonic frequencies. Jiho's team positioned shaped charges at precise locations around the building. The charges were designed by engineer Soman specifically for this mission. The explosion didn't destroy the Great Hall. It shattered it. The crystal structure broke apart along every stress line, and the harmonic frequencies that gave the Osari life turned into chaos. Every member of the High Command died instantly. Their energy patterns dispersed beyond recovery. Jiho's team left a message at the site, carved into the ruins in the Osari language. You provided intelligence that killed 7 million humans. Here is intelligence for you. Humanity does not forget. The strike team extracted without a single casualty. The Osari Empire spent the next 3 months in chaos, trying to rebuild their government. They never figured out how the humans infiltrated their homeworld. They were still looking for the infiltration route when human ships blockaded their entire star system. The Tholian collective learned that neutrality was not protection. The energy beings had abstained from the Galactic Council vote about New Busan. They claimed they were above the concerns of matter-based life forms. Their philosophy held that physical beings were temporary, and their deaths were meaningless in the grand scope of the universe. Fleet Captain Seojin changed their philosophy. He brought a blockade fleet to every Tholian star system, 40 ships per system, maintaining perfect formation, preventing anything from entering or leaving. The Tholians protested. They hadn't done anything wrong. They were neutral. They had no stake in the conflict between humans and Vreth. Seojin's response was broadcast to every Tholian node. You were neutral while 7 million humans died. You watched and did nothing. Now we watch you and do nothing. This blockade will remain for 100 years, exactly as long as humanity was isolated. You wanted to be above the concerns of physical beings. Now you can meditate on that philosophy alone. The blockade was perfect. Human ships rotated in and out on 6-month shifts, maintaining constant coverage. The Tholians tried to break through several times. Every attempt failed. Seojin became known as the patient warden because he never showed anger, never showed emotion. He simply maintained the blockade with mechanical efficiency. The galaxy watched in horror as humanity systematically dismantled every species on the ledger. Some tried to fight. Those species discovered that 50 years of human isolation had created a military machine beyond anything they could comprehend. Human tactics were devastating. Human weapons were unstoppable, and human soldiers fought with a ferocity that came from genuine hatred. The Galactic Council called emergency sessions. They passed resolutions condemning human aggression. They imposed sanctions. They froze human assets that didn't exist anymore because humanity had withdrawn from the galactic economy decades ago. Every response was too little, too late. Some species apologized. The Minari Commonwealth sent a formal delegation to Earth, admitting their government had been wrong to vote against intervention at New Busan. They offered reparations and begged for forgiveness. General Taiyang met with the Minari ambassadors personally. He listened to their apology. He looked at the reparations they offered. Then he showed them something the Minari delegation would never forget: the Hall of Names. It was a vast chamber built into the side of Olympus Mons on Mars. Inside, holographic displays showed every person who died at New Busan. Not just names. Full biographies, faces, videos of them laughing, working, living, their hopes and dreams, their families. Everything they would have become if they had been allowed to live. Taeyang walked the Minari delegation through the hall for 6 hours. He made them look at face after face. He told them stories about random victims, a doctor who was developing a cure for a rare disease, a musician who was composing a symphony, a child who wanted to be a pilot. These are the people your government decided weren't worth protecting, Taeyang said. These are the lives you valued less than maintaining good relations with the Vreth. Your apology is noted. But apologies don't bring back the dead. The Minari ambassadors left Earth in tears. But Taeyang did remove the Minari from the ledger. Species that genuinely acknowledged their mistakes and showed real remorse were spared. It was the only mercy humanity offered. Most species didn't apologize. They either fought or tried to run. Neither strategy worked. The Galactic Council, desperate to stop the human advance, authorized a peacekeeping fleet. 12 species contributed ships. 5,000 vessels in total, the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. They gathered at a neutral star system and prepared to force humanity back into isolation. General Taiyang allowed them to assemble. He watched the fleet composition reports come in. He studied their formations, their tactics, their command structure. Then he ordered the human fleet to let the peacekeeping force cross into human space. The battle was called Terra's Gate. It happened at the outer marker of the Sol system, where the peacekeeping fleet expected to face determined resistance. Instead, they faced something worse. A trap. The human defense network activated, not just automated platforms this time. The entire system. Weapon satellites that had been dormant for decades. Defense stations hidden in asteroid clusters. And behind it all, the full strength of Earth's military. 3,000 warships that had been training together for 50 years. The peacekeeping fleet was destroyed in 4 hours. 5,000 alien warships reduced to debris. Human casualties: 73 ships damaged, 12 destroyed. The battle wasn't even close. Taeyang sent a message to the survivors floating in escape pods. Tell the Galactic Council we are not the ones hiding anymore. Tell them we are coming. Tell them that humanity has learned the lesson they taught us. Strength is the only thing that matters. We are very strong now. On Earth, Counselor Bora watched the battle reports with growing horror. She was one of the few political leaders who had been arguing for restraint. Part 5. The Price of Justice. 18 months after the hunt began, General Taiyang stood in front of a map showing the galaxy divided into zones of human control. Red zones indicated species under active military pressure. Yellow zones showed species waiting for judgment. Green zones marked the few species that had genuinely apologized and been spared. The map was mostly red and yellow. 43 alien species had submitted to human authority. They paid reparations. They accepted human military observers in their governments. They taught their children about New Busan in their schools. Some did this willingly, understanding they deserved punishment. Others did it because they had no choice. The cost was staggering. 12 billion sentient beings had died since the hunt began, some in direct military action, some in economic collapse, some in the chaos that followed when their governments fell. Taiyang kept detailed records of every death. He told himself it was necessary. Justice required a price, but the price was breaking humanity too. On Earth, protests erupted in major cities. Counselor Bora had spent the last year organizing what she called the reconciliation movement. Millions of humans joined her, arguing that 7 million deaths had been avenged 1,000-fold. That continuing the hunt was just murder wearing the mask of justice. The unity government split. Half supported Taeyang's military campaign. Half wanted to stop. Every session of parliament turned into shouting matches. Physical fights broke out between representatives. The society that had united so perfectly after New Busan was tearing itself apart. Agent Hana returned to Earth after her 50th infiltration mission. She walked through the streets of Seoul and barely recognized her home. Military propaganda covered every surface. Children played war games where they pretended to kill aliens. The culture had become focused on one thing: revenge. Hana went to a psychiatric evaluation required for all deep cover operatives. The doctor asked standard questions about stress, trauma, coping mechanisms. Hana answered honestly for the first time in years. "I dream about them," she said. "The aliens I lived with. The ones who were kind to me. The clerk who shared his lunch. The maintenance worker who helped me fix my transport. They're probably dead now, killed by economic collapse or military action or just chaos. And I helped make it happen." The doctor made notes. "Do you regret your service?" Hana thought about that. "I regret New Busan. I regret that 7 million people died for no reason. But I also regret what we've become. We were supposed to be better than them. Instead, we're just better at killing." The psychiatric evaluation flagged her as unfit for further service. Hana didn't care. She joined Bora's movement and started speaking at rallies, telling people about the ordinary aliens who suffered for their government's crimes. Engineer Soman sat in her laboratory, staring at casualty reports from her latest weapon deployment. The biological agent she designed had killed 1.3 billion members of a species called the Vorath. The Vorath had provided raw materials for Vreth weapons manufacturing. Their government deserved punishment, but 1.3 billion individuals, most of them had no idea what their government was doing. They were farmers, teachers, parents, children. Now they were corpses killed by a weapon Soman created. She started a new project, a memorial database. She collected information about every alien species affected by the hunt, their cultures, their art, their history. 3 species had already gone extinct because of human military action. Soman documented everything about them she could find. She worked 18-hour days, desperately trying to preserve what she had helped destroy. Her colleagues thought she was having a breakdown. They were right. But Somin kept working anyway. Someone had to remember. Someone had to bear witness to the cost of justice. Admiral Doyen led the reckoning in its final major engagement against the Ethon Collective. The Ethon were a warrior species who had voted against intervention at New Busan because they respected the Vreth's strength. They refused to submit to humanity. They chose to fight. The battle was brutal. The Ethon were genuinely skilled warriors with powerful ships and fearless crews. They damaged the reckoning badly enough that Doyen had to evacuate 3 decks. They destroyed 40 human frigates. They made humanity pay for every meter of space, but they lost. They always lost. Human military superiority was too great. In the final moments of the battle, an Ethon cruiser rammed the reckoning's bridge section. The impact killed everyone on the command deck, including Admiral Doyen. His last words, recorded by the ship's systems, were, "Tell Earth we made them safe." Doyen's funeral became a massive event. Millions attended in person. Billions watched across human space. Military leaders praised his sacrifice. Politicians called him a hero. Flags flew at half-mast, but at the funeral, Counselor Bora gave a speech that changed everything. She stood in front of Doyen's coffin and spoke the truth nobody wanted to hear. Admiral Doyen died believing he was protecting humanity. He was a good man who served with honor, but he died in a war that stopped being about protection years ago. He died for revenge, not defense. And if we continue down this path, he will not be the last good person we lose to our own hate. Security tried to remove her from the podium. The crowd erupted in chaos. Half cheered her words, half called for her arrest. The unity government faced a crisis. The careful consensus that had held humanity together since New Busan finally shattered. General Taeyang ordered Bora arrested for sedition. Military police went to take her into custody. But civilian authorities refused to hand her over. State governments on Earth declared they would not cooperate with military rule. Colony worlds made similar declarations. For the first time in a century, humanity stood on the edge of civil war. The Galactic Council, watching all this with desperate hope, made one final attempt at peace. They sent a delegation to Earth under flag of truce. The delegation included representatives from species still on the ledger, risking their lives to prevent more bloodshed. The delegation brought an offer. The Galactic Council would construct a memorial to New Busan, not a small one, a massive structure visible from space built on the ruins of the colony. Every species would contribute. Every victim would be named. The massacre would be formally recognized as a crime against all sentient life. More than that, the Council proposed a new justice system. Any species that committed genocide or used weapons of mass destruction would face mandatory intervention. No more votes. No more debates. Crimes against sapient life would be stopped immediately by Council peacekeepers, and humanity would have a permanent seat on the Council with veto power over all military decisions. No species would ever again be able to attack humans without facing the full power of galactic authority. The offer split humanity completely. Military leaders led by Taeyang argued for rejection. They only offer this because we have weapons pointed at them. In 100 years, when they rebuild, they'll forget again. We need to finish the hunt. Civilian leaders led by Bora argued for acceptance. If we reject peace now, we're telling the galaxy that humans value revenge over civilization. We're declaring that might makes right. That was the Vreth's logic. It cannot be ours. The unity government couldn't decide, so they did something unprecedented. They put it to a vote. Every human citizen would decide whether to accept peace or continue the war. The vote took 3 weeks. The debate was intense, bitter, sometimes violent. Families split over it. Friends stopped speaking. The question divided humanity more deeply than anything since the resource wars. Taeyang campaigned for continuing the hunt. He showed people the Hall of Names. He reminded them of the 7 million dead. He argued that only complete victory would ensure humanity's safety. Bora campaigned for peace. She showed people the casualty reports. She brought forward soldiers suffering from PTSD, engineers haunted by their creations, intelligence agents broken by what they'd done. She argued that humanity was destroying itself to avenge the dead. The vote came down to the final day. The margin was razor thin. 51% voted to accept peace. 49% voted to continue the war. Humanity chose peace by the smallest possible margin. Taeyang accepted the vote, but he resigned his command immediately. "I cannot lead a peace I don't believe in," he said. "But I respect the decision of our people. That's what makes us different from the Vreth. We still believe in democracy, even when it breaks our hearts." The memorial construction began on New Busan. Human and alien workers labored together for the first time in a century. The structure took 5 years to complete. It was a tower of crystal and metal that reached kilometers into the sky, with the names of all 7 million victims inscribed in letters large enough to read from orbit. At the base of the memorial, they inscribed the words, "7 million died here, never again, not to any world, not to any people." And below that, in smaller text, "And humanity in its grief and rage nearly forgot this lesson itself." 20 years after the vote, the memorial dedication ceremony brought together representatives from every species in the galaxy. Even the Vreth sent a delegation, though they arrived in small ships without weapons, humble and fearful. Taeyang attended the ceremony. He was 55 years old now, retired from military service, living quietly on Mars.